Let's jump right in. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a truly incredible, newly declassified collection of files, photos, and transcripts straight from the historic Apollo missions. And we're going to do this a bit differently. We're looking at this data through a strictly clinical, objective lens. Think pure scientific style here. We're isolating the facts to see exactly what some of our most highly trained observers actually experienced when they ventured to the moon. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by establishing the declassified files, dive into the striking visual evidence from Apollo 12, listen in on the Apollo 11 transcripts, analyze the psychology behind these anomalies, check out Apollo 17's visuals, and finally, we'll look at the human element of it all. All right, let's kick things off with the declassified Apollo files and establish the physical evidence. Now, before we even look at the photos, we absolutely need to get on the exact same page about what a UAP is in this context. Look, we're not jumping to sensational conclusions here, and we're definitely not asserting alien life. Instead, we're focusing on physical phenomena that these natural skeptics, these incredibly rigorous scientists, attempted to explain away logically and, well, they simply couldn't. So, let's move right along to the visual evidence from Apollo 12. When we isolate this visual data against a stark white background for a really clinical analysis, the contrast is just fascinating. I mean, astronauts typically describe space as this pitch black void, right? A place where you can't even see the stars because of the sun's glare. Yet here, in this official declassified photograph, we are clearly seeing multiple distinct pulsing visual anomalies hanging out in the sky above the lunar surface. If we methodically move through these magnifications, specific blinking phenomena really start to emerge. Just take a look at Area 5 right there. It stands out as an incredibly colorful, highly structured, and frankly, striking object. And you've got to remember, this was 1969. There were no digital special effects to conjure up things like this. This is real, raw data, classified for over 50 years and captured by decades-old technology. Okay, let's rewind a bit and dive into the Apollo 11's transcripts. Pulling back to July 1969, let's look at their real-time reactions. In that distinctive deep space blue, we have the observation of Buzz Aldrin. He very calmly noted a bright, sizable object near their spacecraft about a day into their journey. Naturally, being a scientist, he tried to logically explain it, guessing it was the SIVB, leftover parts of the Saturn module. But ground control quickly debunked that theory. They confirmed the module was actually 6,000 miles away. Aldrin then noted the object seemed to have a bit of an L shape, almost like an open suitcase. But in stark contrast, look at Michael Collins' perspective here, highlighted in alert red. Collins, who was generally a bit more hesitant, actively disagreed with Aldrin's L-shaped theory. Looking through the optics, Collins described a tumbling, hollow cylinder that you could literally look right down into. But strangely enough, when he adjusted the focus on his sextant, he said the shape was suddenly replaced by something looking like an open book. And this brilliantly illustrates the scientific rigor of this crew. Notice Neil Armstrong's observation here in neon yellow. He offered up a third interpretation entirely, 2 connected rings. Think about that for a second. They all witnessed the exact same anomaly at the exact same time, but their individual, objective observations completely varied. There was absolutely zero groupthink happening here. No one was just blindly agreeing with the commander. But wait, the mystery wasn't just outside the spacecraft. Aldrin also meticulously documented bizarre, tiny flashes of light zapping right through their pitch-black cabin. He specifically noted double flashes separated by about a foot. And again, applying that rigorous scientific method, he systematically tested and ruled out static electricity by deliberately generating sparks from his sleep restraint. He practically proved these mysterious flashes were something else entirely. Which brings us to the psychology of an anomaly. Look, instead of jumping to sensational sci-fi conclusions, this crew employed rigorous scientific methodology. They actively tried to attribute the object to debris, they calculated the limits of their visual resolution, debated its physical shape, and purposefully ruled out static electricity inside the cabin. From a psychological standpoint, the fact that they actively disagreed with one another without succumbing to groupthink, that actually adds immense validity to their observations. This definitely isn't mass hysteria, it's just brilliant scientists trying to solve a problem. Now, let's fast forward a bit and examine the visual evidence from Apollo 17. Jumping ahead to 1972, we are again isolating the evidence against a stark white background for a purely clinical analysis. And here, we see a crystal clear magnification of yet another anomaly. This time, it's a very distinct cluster of 3 blue lights just hovering over the lunar landscape. Make no mistake, this is not a lens flare, and it is definitely not a planet. It's a defined, structured anomaly actually captured on film. When we place the Apollo 12 and Apollo 17 visual phenomena side by side like this, we can plainly see the repetition of these unexplained, brightly lit anomalies. Guys, we are looking at completely different missions, completely different crews, occurring years apart in 1969 and 1972, and yet the visual data remains consistently staggering. Finally, we have to talk about the human element. To really resolve this case file, we have to look at the wild dissonance between their private debriefs and their public press conferences. A clinical behavioral analysis of these post-mission interviews reveals overwhelming signs of severe discomfort. Neil Armstrong tightly interlocked his fingers. Michael Collins just trailed off. And Apollo 12's Dick Gordon exhibited massive discomfort, covering his mouth, faking a smile, actively leaning back to create physical distance from the microphone, and even coughing. These are incredibly tough, highly trained individuals, yet they exhibited classic self-soothing and anxiety behaviors when they were just asked basic questions about the lunar sky. Just take this quote from Michael Collins, for example. When publicly asked by a reporter if they could see stars from the surface of the moon, the very men who had just privately debated glowing hollow cylinders and pulsing cabin flashes suddenly became completely evasive and physically agitated. Collins just trailed off and simply said, "I don't remember seeing any." So as we close this explainer, we are left with a truly fascinating forensic puzzle. On one hand, we have undeniable, officially declassified photographs showing glowing, structured anomalies in the sky. And on the other hand, we have the anxious, fidgeting silence of our bravest, most capable scientists. When presented with both the physical data and the very human need to cover it up, which piece of evidence speaks the loudest? I highly encourage you to look at the data presented here, consider the psychology, and decide for yourself.